I'll never forget the day my son was laid to rest. The day I should have been surrounded by family, friends, and people who cared about my son's life turned into a nightmare I never could have imagined. It wasn't the grief, the tears, or the heavy silence of the cemetery that scarred me. No, it was something far worse. It was a woman who didn't know where to park her damn car. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are listening. Your support means everything. I can't even believe I'm telling you this, but here it goes. It all started with a phone call. My son, Tyler, was just 12. A car accident, one that still doesn't make sense to me. He was gone before he could even understand how the world worked. It took me months to even accept he was truly gone. You know the feeling, when you're in a fog, walking through life like it's not real. I remember standing at his grave that day, holding back tears as we lowered his casket into the ground. My heart was already shattered, but there was something about that moment that made it feel like the world had finally taken everything from me. Tyler was my only son. I had no idea how to navigate life without him. But in the middle of all that grief, something even more absurd happened. Something I'm still having trouble understanding. As we stood around the gravesite, quietly mourning, I could hear the sound of an engine revving in the distance. I wasn't thinking much of it, too lost in the moment, when suddenly, I heard tires crunching on gravel. I looked up, and there she was, a white SUV, completely out-of-place vehicle in this solemn space. It wasn't just that she drove into the cemetery. It was that she drove right onto my son's grave. My heart sank, and my mouth went dry. I couldn't believe my eyes. I looked at my husband, who was already looking at me with disbelief, but neither of us could move. The woman in the SUV, let's call her Karen because that's what she looked like, rolled down her window and shouted, "Excuse me, is this a public parking space?" Her voice was shrill, oblivious. She was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses, like she was at a beach, not a cemetery. I felt my blood boiling. My heart raced. My hands were trembling. "What the hell are you doing?" I finally managed to shout. She didn't seem to notice the emotion in my voice. "I'm just trying to park. Can't find any space. Is this not allowed?" I was shaking with anger now. How could someone be so disrespectful? My son's final resting place was in a damn parking spot. "You're on my son's grave," I choked out, fighting to keep my voice steady. That's when she paused, finally taking in what I was saying. Her eyes flickered, but only for a second. The woman didn't apologize. She didn't look horrified. She didn't seem to care. Instead, she just stared at me like I was the one in the wrong. "I didn't see that," she said with a casual shrug. "I thought it was just an open area. You know, I'm just trying to park." I couldn't process what I was hearing. Did she seriously not get it? Did she really not care? But before I could even respond, she went on, "I don't see why you're making such a big deal out of it. I'm sure your son wouldn't mind. He's, like, gone, right? What's the harm?" I felt the heat rise in my chest, my vision blurring. I had a choice to make. Confront this woman or let it go. But how could I let it go? How could I let her desecrate my son's grave like it was some kind of joke? I marched over to the SUV and knocked on her window. She hesitated for a moment before rolling it down. "Get off my son's grave," I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and sadness. The woman looked at me, then back down at the ground, where her tires had left a mark on the fresh earth. I could tell she wasn't exactly remorseful, but she was beginning to realize the situation was more serious than she thought. "I'm just trying to leave," she said, as if she hadn't just parked on a dead child's grave. I heard my husband's voice from behind me, shaking with rage. "What the hell is wrong with you?" He stepped forward, trying to get control of the situation. But honestly, I didn't care about decorum. Not then. And that's when it happened, when the absurdity of the situation took on a life of its own. "Karen, The woman who had parked her car on my son's final resting place smirked at me and said something that made me lose all control. Maybe you should have planned better. Don't be so dramatic. It's just a parking spot. I couldn't hold back anymore. I stepped forward and slapped her across the face. It wasn't even a conscious decision, it just happened in a split second. My whole body shook with the force of it. The slap was loud and sharp in the stillness of the cemetery, but she didn't even flinch. Instead, she stared at me, her mouth twisted into a smug smile. "You should have stayed in your lane, lady," she said coldly. My husband immediately grabbed me, pulling me back before I could do anything else. But the damage had been done. The woman had crossed a line no one should ever cross, and my grief had boiled over into something uncontrollable. That's when someone from the cemetery staff came running over, trying to de-escalate things. But it was too late. Someone had already called the police. The police came. The woman's story was, of course, that she didn't realize she was parked on a grave. She claimed she didn't know what the fuss was about. She was just trying to park. She even said she was in a rush. But the witnesses, the people who'd been at the service, were all too willing to testify. The authorities didn't care much for her excuses. The damage to my son's grave wasn't just about the tire marks, it was about the sheer disrespect. It wasn't the same as parking on a sidewalk or in a parking lot. No one does that to a person's final resting place, no matter how oblivious they are. Karen was arrested for desecration of a grave, a crime that wasn't taken lightly. She was belligerent, but even her lawyer couldn't work his magic to make this go away. The case went to trial, and it became a public spectacle. People were enraged. This was more than just an incident at a cemetery, it was a violation of something sacred. And then, the judge shocked us all. I'll never forget the day of the sentencing. The courtroom was filled with people from the community, all gathered to witness what seemed like the most obvious sentence of all, a fine or probation. But the judge, after hearing the details, looked at Karen and then at the evidence, and without flinching, he declared, "You, Ms. Karen, have desecrated the resting place of a child. This is not just a legal offense, it's a moral one. And for that, you will be sentenced to 10 years in prison." The courtroom went silent. People gasped, then cheered. I wasn't sure how to feel. 10 years. It seemed like a lot, but it also seemed just. It was the first time in a long time that I felt some sense of justice. Maybe it wouldn't bring Tyler back, but maybe, just maybe, it would stop someone from ever doing something so awful again. As Karen was led away in handcuffs, she glared at me one last time, her face twisted in anger. But in that moment, I didn't care. I could finally breathe. It wasn't the ending I'd expected. It wasn't the ending I'd wanted. But it was the one I got. And it was, strangely, the one I needed. Tyler was gone, but at least I could say I fought for him, right up until the very end.